The book of First Samuel isn't just some ancient text. It's this incredible political and spiritual drama. Honestly, it reads like one of those prestige TV shows you can't stop watching. It's all about a nation at a huge crossroads, going from this chaotic bunch of tribes into a real centralized monarchy. This is the story of how that kingdom was born, all told through the lives of three absolutely unforgettable leaders.
So to really get where 1 Samuel is going, you gotta understand where it starts. And this line, the very last verse from the book of Judges, just sets the stage perfectly. This isn't some throwaway comment, it's a diagnosis of a nation in total crisis. I mean, just imagine it. A society with no central government, no king, no law except for whatever you felt was right. It was pure anarchy, morally, spiritually, and politically. Without a leader, the nation was literally falling apart.
And that's the journey 1 Samuel takes us on. It's this messy, dramatic, and fascinating shift from that total chaos to a powerful, unified kingdom. It's a huge transformation in history, and the entire story is driven by the actions and really the intertwined fates of three central figures.
Okay, so our story begins with the man who basically stands as the bridge between these two worlds. He's the last of the old guard, a deeply respected judge and prophet, and he becomes the reluctant kingmaker who's going to anoint the next generation of leadership.
And here they are, our three main players. First, you've got Samuel, the revered prophet who kind of reluctantly brings in the age of kings. Then there's Saul, the man the people chose, their perfect idea of a warrior king. And finally, David, the shepherd boy that God chose who is destined to become Israel's greatest king ever. The whole book seriously just pivots on the dramatic and often really conflicted relationship between these three men. You can really see the flow of history right here. The era of the judges, that whole do-whatever-you-want chaos, is coming to an end. Samuel steps in as this respected prophet and the last of the judges, but his time is all about transition. He's that crucial link that leads directly to the founding of the monarchy. And here it is, the moment everything changes. The people of Israel look around at all the other nations with their powerful kings and their big armies, and they basically say, yeah, we want one of those. They demand a human king, which you have to understand is a huge deal. It's basically a rejection of God's direct rule over them. It's a fateful choice, and God, working through a very reluctant Samuel, decides to give them what they want.
So, the people asked, and they received. Let's meet Israel's very first king, Saul. Now, on the surface, this guy was the perfect candidate. He was exactly the kind of leader the people had been hoping for. Saul absolutely looked the part. The text says he was handsome and so tall he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. I mean, he was a giant of a man. He had such a promising start, just brimming with potential. But his story, it becomes one of the most tragic in the entire Bible. It's a classic cautionary tale about a leader who starts with every possible advantage but ends up in total ruin.
And this is where we see Saul's tragic downfall in such sharp detail. His greatest strength, the very things that made him king in the first place, that get twisted and become his most fatal flaws. That striking appearance, it feeds a deep-seated pride. His natural initiative, it sours an outright rebellion against God's direct commands. His incredible bravery, it devolves into a recklessness that has him making these rash vows that nearly cost his own son his life. It's just this slow, tragic corrosion of his character.
And this right here is the breaking point. This is the moment Saul's reign effectively ends. After he flat out disobeys a command from God, the prophet Samuel confronts him with these absolutely devastating words. Saul tries to make excuses, these religious justifications for what he did, but Samuel just cuts right through it all. The message couldn't be clearer. God cares about obedience from the heart way more than any empty religious show. And for this one act of disobedience, Saul is rejected as king.
So with Saul rejected, God starts his own search for a king, but this time the criteria are going to be completely different. Forget about height, forget about looks. This part of the story is all about what you might call a reversal of human fortune, where God's choice is specifically designed to turn all worldly expectations upside down.
This principle is the central theme of the entire book, maybe the most important line. Israel chose Saul based on what they could see, his height, his strength, his image. But God works on a totally different level. He's not looking at the resume, he's not looking at the photo op, he's looking at the inner character, the actual condition of the heart.
And who does God find? David. Literally the complete opposite of Saul. He's the youngest of 8 sons. So overlooked his own father doesn't even bother to present him. He's from a pretty insignificant family. He's a shepherd, not a warrior.
By every human standard, he is the least likely candidate you could possibly imagine. But God saw in him the one thing that mattered most, a heart that was totally devoted to him. So this secret anointing of David sets the stage for the most tense and dramatic part of the whole book. We now have two kings in one kingdom. Saul, the rejected king who is still sitting on the throne, and David, the anointed king who is now a fugitive running for his life. This creates this inevitable, dangerous conflict for the future of the entire nation.
And wow, the contrast between these two men could not be more stark. As Saul spirals downward, losing God's spirit and just becoming consumed by this insane paranoia and jealousy, David rises. He is filled with God's spirit, he stays faithful even while on the run, and he even spares Saul's life on multiple occasions when he has the chance to end it all. It's just a perfect picture of one man's kingdom being torn away, while the other is being promised a dynasty that will last forever.
Now, this simmering conflict can't last forever, right? The book reaches its climax with the tragic death of Saul and his sons on the battlefield. It's a really dark, somber end to his reign, but it marks the definitive end of Israel's first failed experiment with having a king. The throne is finally empty, paving the way for David to take his rightful place.
So after this whole incredible story, what are the big takeaways? Well, the book leaves us with some really powerful, timeless truths. It shows us that true leadership is ultimately about your inner character, not your outward charisma. It argues that sincere obedience is what really matters, way more than just going through the religious motions. It reminds us that God often chooses the overlooked and the unlikely to accomplish his greatest purposes. And finally, we get this sobering look at how one person's pride and disobedience can have absolutely devastating consequences for an entire nation.
And this brings us to one final provocative thought. The core question of 1 Samuel, what truly makes a great leader, their image or their heart, is just as relevant today as it was 3,000 years ago. It really forces us to ask ourselves, when we look at our own leaders, in any field, what are we really looking for? It's a question that echoes from ancient history right into our headlines today.